Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Sunrise Extra. Look at that, my friends. Drew, good morning.
Hey, good morning there, Brenda. Good morning to Rodney again. And we do have a special guest on Sunrise Extra this morning because we're going to be talking movies this morning on the Extra program. We have Shawn Levy with us. Shawn was a longtime film critic right here at KHW, as well as at the Oregonian. So a lot to cover here. We wanted to take things a little lighter on a Friday morning as we head into the weekend. And one of the things we've been doing on our Sunrise TV show, really for the past month, we started with just a movie competition amongst all-time great films. And then in the last 2 weeks, we narrowed it down, a competition amongst comedic films, all-time funny films. So Shawn, let's just start there since we've been covering this on our TV show. We have what's called the Clash of the Comedies. We started with 16 funny movies dating from 1970 to the present, so covering the last 50 years. Bottom line is we're down to the final four. Yesterday, Blazing Saddles beat Animal House in one semifinal. Right now, Groundhog Day is beating Bridesmaids in our other semifinal. Do you have any thoughts on this competition as we are narrowing down to the final two?
Boy, those are, Groundhog Day and Bridesmaids are pretty different films. Groundhog Day is kind of philosophical. It's very cleverly constructed and very, really original, just as writing. But Bridesmaids is, gut funny. Like you laugh hard at Bridesmaids, and Groundhog Day is the type of laugh that you think of. So really, it's hard to compare them. They're two different flavors. If you're thinking about Blazing Saddles in the final round, Bridesmaids and Blazing Saddles looks like a pretty good, gut laugh movie showdown. I'm interested in this.
Right.
Rodney's here. I lean toward the Weatherman movie a little bit, Groundhog Day, but Bridesmaid is a deeply funny movie.
Weatherman movie.
Rod, I know that makes you happy.
A lot of people have talked about, hey,
No, that's right. Shawn picked up on the fact, the honest truth, that Groundhog at its core is a Weatherman's movie. Thank you, Shawn. I bow to you.
There's a couple of good Weatherman movies. There's L.A. Story with Steve Martin, and the Nick Cage movie, The Weather Guy.
Yeah. Shawn, real quick, what I thought was weird about the Weather Guy, it was strange because people were throwing Slurpees at Nicolas Cage, at the Weatherman, and I couldn't get past that because I thought, people don't throw Slurpees at the Weatherman. So if you saw that movie, you know what I'm talking about. It seemed like that was just a reoccurring, bit of that particular film.
Wasn't it set in Chicago, though? I mean, you don't hear much about Chicago nice. I love Chicago, but it's a tough town.
All right, Shawn, here's a question for you. Generally speaking, this has been a time where a lot of us have been watching more movies, I don't want to say stuck at home, but we're all staying at home, right, during this quarantine situation. So you yourself, I imagine that you've been watching more movies even for yourself, and have you seen anything over the past month that you would really recommend to our viewers here this morning?
Boy, I use this time kind of, it's like bonus time for me as a film critic and a film lover. I can catch up on things I've always wanted to see since there's not really the ticking clock of work connected to it. 2 nights ago, I watched The Death of Stalin on Netflix. Armando Iannucci is one of the creators of Veep. And it's a hilarious comedy with Jeffrey Tambor and Steve Buscemi about the Soviet Union in 1953, and it's a dark, funny, political, historical comedy. Very dark, but a comedy. And I wouldn't have watched that if I had been sort of on the clock and doing my regular stuff. I've seen lately, I'll catch something at the very beginning on Turner Classics. I watched Swing Time with Fred Astaire and Grace and Ginger Rogers yesterday, which I've seen before, but it was just such a treat that it was beginning and I could watch Fred Astaire dance and sort of get taken out of myself. and I'll rely on happenstance like that in addition to looking at the screening platforms.
You know what I need? I need a list. Shawn, I need a list because I am one of those people who, when I see all those choices on Netflix and HBO and Showtime, I will spend 30 minutes trying to figure out what the heck I'm going to watch. But I can tell you this, two of the things that I have totally been binging, I don't know yet. I've got one more episode of Homeland to drop. And I love that series. What, 8 seasons now? And then Ozark. Those are the ones that we rip through lately.
Ozark.
That's some pretty tense viewing for staying at home. I'd be scratching at the walls a little bit. I'm a big fan of Better Call Saul, which is on several platforms and is still giving us live updates to the season. I think that was very near the end of season 5 right now. On Netflix, I'm very fond of BoJack Horseman, which is surreal. It's nice also to find something that's in 25 and 30-minute chunks. A lot of the streaming shows are an hour. And you can gulp down 3 or 4 episodes of, say, The Good Place or BoJack Horseman or Veep or Friends or The Office, and those things they're kind of timeless. Even though there are little date stamps of culture sometimes in them, they're really, the humor of them is pretty timeless. I also have been watching The Marvelous Miss Maisel on Amazon. Also watched The Wire. Until the tension got too much. I rewatched the 3 seasons of The Wire. Was amazed to see Michael B. Jordan as a kid in the drug trade in the very first year. Looks like he's about 4 years old. He's probably about 12. So
Right.
All that stuff is out there. But you're right. You can spend your TV watching time choosing what to watch on TV. It's a little maddening.
You mentioned streaming services, Shawn, so let's tackle that right now, because as people are home, they may be thinking, which streaming service really gives you the best bang for your buck? Do you have a preference with all the ones that are out there right now?
Well, if you're watching movies, and particularly if you're interested in more than the last 20 years or so, Netflix is not necessarily the number one. Netflix has amazing original content, and they'll focus in on films from, say, Quentin Tarantino or Michael Mann or David Fincher, more recent variety of directors. But Amazon Prime, which doesn't have as much original programming, can give you films going back to the silent era. So you get a blend there of classic and contemporary films and some original sort of series programming. Another one I want to mention on Amazon is Mozart in the Jungle, with Gael Garcia Bernal, a delightful comedy set in the world of a symphony orchestra. My favorite is the Criterion channel. Criterion, if you are interested in film history, they've done the best Blu-rays and DVDs for 10, 20 years, and they've got a channel that's relatively inexpensive. It's about $100 for the year, and it has hundreds and hundreds of movies of all kinds. It has classic films, it has foreign films, family entertainment, animated, kids movies from around the world. They have quite a number of relatively recent films. They do a lot of film programming, so they'll have a collection. There's one that they've currently curated of stylish movies from the 70s that includes blaxploitation movies and things like The Man Who Fell to Earth. So they've got a tremendous variety, and that's where I go when I'm saying, okay, I've had enough starch and sugar in my movie diet. I need a little bit of protein. I'm going to watch a Kurosawa movie that I've never seen before, that sort of thing. So Amazon for a blend of things, Netflix for their original programming, Criterion Channel if you want to take a deep dive into cinema.
Well, you have somebody agreeing with you right here, Lisa Breck, on our Facebook live stream. She says Amazon Prime is great. I really appreciate the movie critic perspective because, again, when I watch movies personally, I feel like I'm so invested. I hang there right in the moment. I don't like to think too far ahead. Like my boyfriend is one where he figures stuff out and he'll blurt something out. I'm like, I didn't even think of that. No, don't. Shush, zip, zip. And then I used to work with a weatherman. Drew, you know who I'm talking about. And he would quote movie lines all the time. And sometimes they'd be hilariously offensive. And I'd be like, oh, and he'd look at me like, it's a movie line, calm down. Shawn, do you have a favorite movie line?
A favorite movie line? Boy, there are so many. I think often of Clint Eastwood aiming his shotgun at Gene Hackman at the end of Unforgiven, saying, "Deserves got nothing to do with it." I built a house, I don't deserve this. And Clint's, "Deserves got nothing to do with it." And, you know, I read a lot of poetry and listen to, rock music or popular music that has, deep lyrical content. My brain tends to go there more when it comes to lines. I'll tell you a movie that is nothing but quotable lines. The two movies I'm always asked what my favorite movies are, and I say Chinatown because it's a favorite and it has a specific resonance in my personal biography. But the movie I've seen the most from beginning to end, the most number of times in my life, is Casablanca. And there's not a scene in Casablanca that doesn't have a classic line in it.
Yeah.
I've got a couple of questions for, actually, Brenda, that was probably the hardest question you could ask an individual. Favorite movie line? As you were asking Shawn that question, I had all these lines running through my head, and some of them are just random. Like, for some reason, Doc in Back to the Future saying, 1.21 gigawatts! That is constantly in the back of my head. It's been there for 30 years. But, Shawn, I wanted to ask you, since you just brought it up, Casablanca. Casablanca, I've never seen it. I've heard it all my life, what a great film it was. It was even talked about in a film class I had in college. But what is it about that movie that makes it still great today, 50, 60 years after it was produced?
Oh, it's 80 years. It's
80 now?
Greatest.
It's as old as Wizard of Oz?
Ever made. 80. I think so. I mean, it's not as much a miracle of movie magic as The Wizard of Oz. But Casablanca has romance, tension, crime, comedy. It's got this array of international actors. There's only 3 people with speaking lines in Casablanca who were born in the United States. Humphrey Bogart, Dooley Wilson, the piano player, and a bit player. And when they were making the movie, they were writing the script in real time. So they did not know the ending. And that gave the performances this kind of realism. Ingrid Bergman is torn between 2 men, and when she reported to the set every day, she did not know who she was going to end up with. So she had to play the part as if, well, it could be him or it could be him. And I think that adds to it. But it's also Humphrey Bogart and Ingrid Bergman, 2 of our great, iconic screen stars of the golden era, at their most elegant, their most romantic. Bogart at his most cynical and crafty. Claude Rains and Peter Lorre and Sidney Greenstreet, 3 of the great supporting players in the history of cinema, in terrific, colorful roles. It's also got music. There are 3 musical scenes. One of the themes of Casablanca is a love song that the casino owner can't bear to hear because it reminds him of a broken romance. And that becomes part of the plot. And then there's a wonderful sequence where the German soldiers start singing a song and they get drowned out by the French national anthem, the Marseillaise. So I envy you, Drew, because I've probably seen that movie 40 times, but I wish I could have the fun of seeing it the first time.
Wow, to me, waiting for that magical line, here's looking at you kids, like seeing the Mona Lisa when you first go into the Louvre in Paris, the moment. But Shawn, I'm curious, being in the profession, have you been keeping up with what Hollywood is talking about? And let's assume that movie theaters open up at some point this summer. Of course, they may not. But if they do, are there some movie openings that are coming up that you're looking forward to, maybe in July or August or September down the road?
Boy, I'm so out of the loop on what's in production and what's in the pipeline. I stopped reviewing at the end of 2016. And I'm still waiting for the day I can drive past a multiplex and not know any of the movies that are on the marquee, but so many things are sequels and remakes that I recognize something every time. Um, I do think that, the way the movie calendar works, that we have these sort of big entertainments throughout the summer, these blockbusters that like sort of claim whole weeks and whole months in some cases, and then starting around October 1st, we start getting the prestige films that are competing for the awards. If all that stuff gets jammed into the later part of the year, we may see a couple of interesting phenomena occur. I think some of the smaller, prestigious movies might get sort of ground out of the picture. A movie like Parasite, wonderful movie that won the Oscar for Best Film. Where would the space be for that to play and to, stick in people's heads? Conversely, I think some of the blockbusters, which often get ignored at awards time, if they're coming out in October and November instead of June and July, might stick in people's heads. You might see someone nominated for a supporting actor or actress prize who plays a villain in a comic book movie. So those sort of changes are interesting to anticipate.
You guys, shall we look at a few viewer comments that we have posted on our Facebook page? Because this is interesting. They're talking about memorable movie experiences. So, Director Brian, how many of these do we have? Just to kind of give us we've got 5. Was 10 and it was terrifying. You see me, I'm like here getting closer to the screen to read them. I agree, Jaws was absolutely chilling. I think I was in like junior high school at that time. Brian, do we have some more? Okay, here we come. Wait for it. Wait for it. Okay, Dave Brown says falling asleep in a theater for the first time ever during The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. Shawn, I've never seen that one. I don't know if it's sleepable or not.
Yeah,
Becky Bella Groves says, my first date when I was 13, I was able to go without a chaperone for the first time, and I didn't know ahead of time what it was about. Blue Lagoon, LOL. Oh, that's funny, Brooke Shields. And then Barbara Gaines says, Wizard of Oz. I was 6, so 60 years ago. The Flying Monkeys and the Melting Witch. Eek! I know that used to scare the heck out of me as a kid too. And Lynn Gray, Star Wars, waited in line that wrapped around 4 city blocks to see it, and it was the most technologically advanced movie made up until that time. I think I was 12 when the first one came out. I hated that movie, by the way. I was so bored. My friends took me seriously, my friends took me for my birthday.
Really?
Yeah, and I hated that movie. Just so you know.
Huh. And it never grew on you either, huh?
Not really, and I've seen a lot of them because my family's a big fan of the whole Star Wars franchise. So through osmosis or through luck of the draw, I sat in way too many Star Wars movies.
Yes.
Well, Shawn mentioned Casablanca earlier as the movie he's seen most often. But Shawn, do you have, like the viewers just described, a memorable movie moment of your own?
Oh, goodness. I mentioned Chinatown earlier. My dad was very influential on me becoming a film lover. He would come home from work and say, hey, On the Waterfront is on at 11 o'clock. This is in the days before VCRs or cable or, any
Right.
organized way to see old movies. You had to wait for them to come on. And he'd say, we take a nap after dinner and you can get back up and watch it with me. And I might not have made it through, but that gave me the idea that movies were like a cultural experience to be anticipated. And when we saw Chinatown, when it first came out in about 1974, 75, so I was about 14 years old, I disagreed with him. I thought it was great and he didn't like it. It was too dark for him. And that was like sort of a dividing line. That's kind of why I personally connect with that movie, because my experience of walking home from the theater in New York with my dad and having a disagreement about movies with my mentor. And years later, my dad said, that was a great movie. And I was like, aha! So that experience really resonates for me. In terms of spectacle, Apocalypse Now at the Ziegfeld Theater in 1979. It was almost still a work in progress. They didn't have credits at the beginning or end. And you had no idea someone could make a movie like that. And the Ziegfeld Theater screen was larger than the side of a building. It was a magnificent space, and that was mind-blowing.
You know, I had an experience, and you could probably relate to this, Shawn. I'm sure you've experienced this at least once before. Maybe Brenda and Rod, you have too. I go to the movie theater. I'm about, well, it was 1994, so I was 20 years old. And we were going to see Interview with a Vampire. The woman I was dating at the time and I were going to go see Interview with a Vampire. We get up to the ticket counter, sold out. Can't see Interview with a Vampire. She's like, well, what else do you want to see? I'm like, nothing. I want to see nothing else. I came to see that movie. Let's go home. And she's like, no, we have to see something. And we're looking at the posters there on the wall. And she says, what about Pulp Fiction? I'm like, what is that? I've never even heard of it. I don't know what that is. It just came out that weekend. I said, fine, we'll go see Pulp Fiction. I had no idea what I was walking into. Didn't know who was in the film. As the credits started rolling up, I'm like, oh, John Travolta's in this? Oh, Bruce Willis is in this? Samuel L. Jackson. Sat back and watched what remains to this day one of my all-time favorite movies. But I do think part of it was not knowing anything about the movie going in and just having a complete open mind as to, okay, I don't know what I'm in for, but let's go. That does make a difference, don't you think, Shawn?
Yeah, and in fact, that's the perfect critical mindset. When I was reviewing movies regularly for the newspaper or for you guys, I did not read about the movie before I saw it. I tried to remain as blank as I could. I didn't want to come in with someone else's idea in my head of this is a good movie or the performances are good or bad or what have you. I wanted to experience it as raw as I could. And that's hard because I kept up with the news and knew what was going on, knew the work of the people who were involved, but I wanted to be free of opinions so I could sit there with my own reactions. And that's the ideal state. I would often, people would say, well, you think you have the last word about movies. And I would say, no, the critic has the first word, and then the conversation begins. But to participate in the conversation, go see the movie, then read the reviews, then you're in the conversation. I think so. What you experience with Pulp Fiction really is the ideal way to see any movie. And talk about a movie filled with quotable lines. My goodness.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to leave just a quick last word with our viewers. Raul says, in middle school, me and my friend did Grease and Footloose. And then Scott says, Tarantino is king. Shawn Levy, we appreciate you joining us on the stream. It's always fun to talk to you. And happy viewing, guys. That'll do it for us on Sunrise Extra. Have a great morning.